right, welcome to the first NavXP webinar, Webinars for Executive Pastors. We have a great couple guests here today. We have Dr. David Fletcher and Dr. Joshua Whitehead. And really quickly, I just wanted to welcome everybody and let you know the purpose of the NavXP webinar is to be a resource that brings encouragement and the experience of the executive pastor community together in a way that generates hope and excitement about what God is doing to grow church through the gifts and calling of executive pastors. Now, I envision the webinar format will allow it to be both personal and let everyone participate. The way that you can do that before and during the webinar is to tweet questions and comments with the hashtag NavXP. And during the webinar, we'll have the opportunity to take a few of those questions and have Dr. David Fletcher and Dr. Joshua Whitehead answer those if we have time. And then after the webinar, the video is going to be posted on YouTube and on xpastor.org for comments and discussions. Now, if you have a Google account, in the future you'll be able to participate more directly in the live hangout. And just as a reminder for you guys, the value for this comes from these webinars primarily will be directly proportional to your engagement as a pastor. You have something incredibly valuable to add to this, and your question, your story, your experience can truly impact another church's journey. And so we're really glad you're here today. And so I want to introduce our guest pastors. Dr. David Fletcher has been a pastor for over 30 years in churches of up to 8,000 people. He founded xpastor.org in 2003, and it's grown into a global resource for churches of all sizes. Two of David's books will actually be out this year, and he also teaches as an adjunct seminary professor and directs a doctorate program in India, I believe. Is that correct, David?
Yes, that's right.
And recently you just got back from India as well.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago. Had a wonderful and terrible time over there.
Well, that's fantastic that there were some wonderful parts to it. Well, tell us a little bit about what else is going on in the life of David Fletcher's ministry right now.
Well, we're transitioning right now. We were up in Akron, Ohio for about 4 years. We're Southwesterners originally from California, so we're going to go back to warmer climates in Austin. We're going to use this time of transition to do a lot of work with xPastor, and I love to write. My People Patterns book is coming out shortly, and that can be accessed through the xpastor.org website. So we're just having a great time right now.
Fantastic. Well, I'm really thankful you're able to be here today. I know you have a lot of experience and wisdom to add that can really benefit XPs all over the world and all over the country. Well, whether you're struggling with a lack of resources or not, as a faithful servant, we should always be searching for ways to multiply what God has placed in our care, and that's part of what we're trying to do with NavXP, is bring resources to executive pastors all over the place who are struggling with ways to grow ministry and do it with less money and with tight budgets. I know Josh and David have more experience between them of multiplying ministry and wrestling with tight budgets than anyone else I know. And so, my first question with you guys is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but have you ever wrestled with the challenge of how to grow ministry with less money? And can you share some of the stories as you've led teams through tough financial times or when ministry has outpaced your resources?
Well, Tony, for us, it's never been a problem. I had these magic seeds in my pocket for money trees, and we just printed our own bills. It really wasn't a problem. Oh, wait, you wanted a serious answer, not a tongue-in-cheek answer. I would say this: it's never about money. It's about vision. And when your people are mobilized, there's going to be enough money to do the right kind of ministry. A long time ago, just when computers were in their infancy, my first Mac didn't even have a hard disk in it, and I was writing a church discipleship program called the Ephesians Project, and I really needed a hard disk, but that was big bucks back then, like 500 or 1,000 bucks for a 20 megabyte hard disk. But you know what? We just played like waffles or pancakes with those floppy drives that aren't even around anymore, and we just made it happen. So, when the money's not there, it forces you to be creative. It forces you to do things you wouldn't normally do. But I'd say great ministry is never about money. It's about vision and dedication and passion for Christ.
Great. Phenomenal. Tell us a little bit about how you mentioned vision. Tell us a little bit about how being on having a strong vision and being on mission impacts resource use in your experience.
Well, for me, vision is what releases you to focus. Because if you don't have a vision on where you want to go, every road seems perfectly acceptable, right? And so
Right.
you pursue 100 rabbit trails, none of which are very effective. So in a recent ministry up at the chapel, both the culture changed in the church and the vision had changed, and we didn't need a big print shop anymore. Um, so by consolidating ministry, because we had vision, we freed up a fair amount of funds every year. Another thing was, remember, churches 30, 20 years ago, kitchens and Wednesday night dinners were really, really big. Well, that was before the rise of fast food, Panera, McDonald's, etc. And now people don't want to spend, 15 bucks, 20 bucks to have dinner at church when they can maybe get something better at Panera on the way to church. So we reduced expenses there, and then that freed up money in another area. So actually being in a recession, which we were a bunch of years ago, that actually helped us focus on the vision that we wanted and should have been doing anyhow.
Hmm. Well, David, what would you say for pastors who are struggling right now with a budget reduction or struggling to make ends meet for the breadth of ministry that they have going on? What would be some of the tips that you would give them on how to use that focus to
Well,
help that problem?
Tony, I think you hit it right there when you said breadth of ministry. Most people are trying to do too much. Just skinny it down. Do a few things exceedingly well. On the People Patterns website that I have an indicator to help people learn about their strengths and limitations. Some people, and most churches are this way, they think they can do everything well. They're going to have the best singles program and college program and senior citizens program and school, etc. And just historically, that just isn't so. That's just not going to happen. So focus on the things that you can do best. And then let go of some of those other things. Let some other churches do those things really well. And do the things that God has blessed you with and given you the gifts to do.
That's fantastic. Um, you know, I work with Oksano. I'm one of the lead navigators, and so that's what I do is help pastors and churches find clarity in who they are and what they're called to. And it's amazing to see how clarity plays a role in how churches deal with money. In fact, David, I know you wrote a fantastic article, How Vision Sets the Budget. I really enjoyed reading that, and thanks so much for giving us some of that experience you had. If you could communicate one thing about growing ministry to every executive pastor in the U.S., what would it be?
Well, I'm not sure the American church really wants to hear this, but having just come back from India and trying to have a fairly simple lifestyle for past 8 years, Tammy and I have lived with one car. Not everybody can do that, especially with kids. I would say Americans have more toys than they know what to do with. There's jet skis and second and third and fourth cars and jewelry and clothing and kids' toys and big screen TVs and sports tickets, ranch and lake houses and fancy lawnmowers. Our churches have more money than we know what to do with. That's why I get back to vision. It's about vision to release money to do what should be done, living within a kingdom mindset and eternal mindset. There's nothing wrong about any of the things that I just mentioned, except when they own us. And I think for most of us, things own us. We don't own our things.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a little difficult to hear, but incredibly true. And I want to remind everybody that during this hangout, you can certainly text questions. You just need to tweet them with the hashtag NavXP, and we'll get those and we'll try to include them in what's going on here. So feel free to comment or ask any questions of Josh or David. Now, kind of a follow-up question is David, let's start with you. What would you share with an executive pastor who's struggling with a shrinking budget?
Well, we had that at the chapel. It was a hard time. It was in the midst of the recession. It was in the midst of the Rust budget. I had to cut the budget by $750,000. That's more than most churches' entire budgets. Obviously, I was not on the anybody's hit parade. I didn't even want to look at my own self in the mirror. I didn't like the guy for what I had to do, and yet it was God's calling. Somebody had to reduce the budget. The church just couldn't afford it. So one is you just have to own the pain. This is going to be hard. The second is we can't do everything that we want to do. And in America, we all want to be like Walmart and have the biggest shop around because we think bigger and mass-produced is better. Well, maybe God is calling you to something new, something different, something better, something a little more focused, maybe something a little simpler. Maybe you're not going to have all the bells and whistles, and you're going to have to decide what luxuries you do have. And there is nothing wrong with that. That's just called great, healthy discipline that God brings to us, even when we don't want it.
Well, that is, I love it, David, that you're not afraid to bring a hard but true message. Now, a couple questions that have been tweeted to us while we've been in is I want to share one with you from Jarrett. He says, I recently took an executive pastor position on a team overseeing church planting and movement in the Southeast. One question we always encounter is, how can I afford to pay quality leaders in my church plant? If I can't pay them, how do I raise them up, motivate them, and reward them?
Sure. I think Josh and I are right on the same page on a lot of these things. I love what he just said. I would answer that question out of Ephesians 4. That's a book in the Bible, by the way. Our role as pastors is not to do ministry first. And a lot of pastors are just shocked with that, and they should just get over it because it's what the Apostle Paul said. Our role as pastors is to equip the saints to do ministry. And you hear this a lot of times. People say, well, whose ministry is it? And we'll say, it's John Smith's church. And that's an easy thing. I do it myself, but we really shouldn't. It's Christ's church, and it belongs to the people. And our role is to train godly leaders to own it. But the problem, and the reason why they don't want to own it, is because we never give it to them in the first place. We kind of give them half of it, not total responsibility, because we don't trust them, we haven't trained them, or we're afraid of job security or whatever. So my view is just give it away. Empower them, train them. They have to be able to fail. Give them a safe or an easy fail-safe net so they can't fall too far. And then let their creativity go, and then you'll see ministry truly flourish. We did that with the thing in Mozambique where we empowered this whole $70,000 ministry. We appointed leaders, they were selected, appointed, went through all the process. They had a policy, for all the policy wonks out there, they had all that. But then the ministry really grew and expanded because it was the people of the church who owned it. And they were so excited. They did far more than bulletin announcements and pulpit announcements could ever do because they were infecting their friends with this great ministry in Mozambique.
That's tremendous. That's tremendous. What an incredible way to create ministry with less money is put it in the hands of the people that God designed to do it. I heard somebody say one time, shepherds don't make new sheep, sheep make new sheep.
Yeah, that's good.
And the ministry is most effective when it's in the hands of the people. I know it's a struggle, particularly for pastors who are as passionate about what they do as you are and as David is. At least I always had a constant struggle as an executive pastor not to do the ministry, to engage in the nuts and bolts, to just get it done right. But what I heard you say is take the time to train and equip people who can do it and who have a passion to do it instead of trying to do it all as the pastor, as the professional minister. And that gives you the opportunity to expand the scope of the ministry you can do and to do more with a lot less. And that was part of Travis's question too, was we really love to raise up leaders from the inside as opposed to hiring. And so I really feel like that's going to resonate with who they are as a church. Both you guys answered, is really putting it in the hands of people. Now, that requires a strong leadership development network, which is what Josh was saying is a focus on leadership development can really help create that expanded scope of ministry as you're raising up people who are in the church to take ownership of the ministry of the church. I hate to be cliche, but stop going to church and start being the church. And so what David was saying was we need to enable them to do that by letting go of some of the ministry, equipping them and putting it in their hands. And then Josh was saying continuing to develop them, to lead them and develop them as leaders. I want to read this question from Jay Rigg. A lot of pastors are struggling to cut back their budget and still maintain strong ministry. What advice would you give about areas to cut and areas not to touch? David?
Well, there's no hard and fast rules on that in terms of specific ministries. I think it's the principle that you need to look at, and what is the I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. What's the vision of your church? Where is it going? What are the things that you want to focus on? Obviously, you want to focus on leadership development, inculcating vision to your leaders. But then, whether it's a kitchen or a print shop that should go up or down, or a college ministry that needs $50,000 or $100,000 more or less, I think you want to have just a clear awareness and a time to look strategically at what God is calling you to do, and then focus on that. I think what happens is we don't want to have that frank look at our ministries. We want to hope that everything's going to turn out well without taking a hard look and then making some pretty hard leadership decisions about where God you think is taking you. But that's what leaders do. Leaders are paid, or volunteer leaders make hard decisions. They ask people to go along. You tell people very well what the options are. One of the problems in that is, in the American political scene, we're used to our leaders overpromising. And we, the people, want that. And we believe those overpromises. So that brings into the church the same thing, that we want our leaders to overpromise, that, everything's going to be okay, nothing's going to bad happen. Well, no, actually, God may take you through a time of trial so that you can be tougher, leaner, stronger, more spiritually mature.
Well, David, I'd like to ask you, as we're about to wrap up here, are there any other resources that you recommend to pastors who are trying to grow ministry beyond the limitation of finances?
Yeah, you probably remember the title. I've been traveling right now, and the title's escaping me, of Jim Shepard and Chris Willard's new book. Well, people can look on Amazon for that. We're going to feature it soon at the XP seminar at the end of the month of February. And then if you go to XPastor, look up Brad Leeper in the search field. Brad has numerous articles on what it means to be a generous church. I think your money problems are over when you have a generous church. That doesn't mean that the floodgates are going to be so big that your budget will have a surplus every year. I've never had that, only because I'm going to spend it all. I mean, we just, if we get more money, then our budget's going to grow. That means you're never going to have enough money. But Brad has some good thoughts on that, and also in Jim's and Chris's book.
Yeah, Contagious Generosity is a fantastic book.
There we go, Contagious Generosity.
Yeah, it absolutely redefined part of my expectations for what a healthy, generous church looked like. Absolutely great investment for any pastor or executive pastor. That's fantastic. Well, thank you, David, so much for your experience. My
pleasure.
Just give you an opportunity. Is there anything else you'd like to share with executive pastors who are watching?
Let me close with a story. So we're with somebody in Dallas, and they were a tither. Okay, I'm fine with that. It's not my cup of tea. I think the New Testament calls it something far higher than that. And this guy was really proud that he was given his 10%. But he had no concept of being a generous giver. He had no joy in his giving either, because he was just doing what the law said, which he saw as 10%. Tithing in the Old Testament is actually more like 23 1/3, but let's don't confuse facts with feelings. So he was just doing his deal and having not even a great time. It was just his obligation. And it was really unfortunate, because he had a lot of money, but he had no joy in his giving. I think we need to be just happy, joyful givers and give away as much as possible, and then we'll find great joy.
Absolutely. Great word. Thank you for
Good
sharing
to be
with
you,
us.
Tony. Thanks so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. I want to just say how much I appreciate Dr. David Fletcher and Dr. Josh Whitehead for contributing their time and experience, for sharing with us. And I want to just remind everybody who's watching, the greatest value in coming together is in continuing the conversation, sharing your experience, your learning, and supporting one another for the sake of God's kingdom. I think executive pastors have a really unique calling and skill set. And God uses that to leverage His church in creative and unimagined ways. And we want to hear your voice in the conversation. And so all the questions that we didn't get to and the questions that you raise over the following days as we continue the conversation on xpastor.org, they're going to be posted there for us to be able to continue to dialogue around these. And you can sign up for the NavXP webinar and newsletter on my blog, tonybowick.com. And just wanted to let you know that today's webinar video was hosted on Google Plus Hangouts. The video is going to be posted on xpastor.org and on joshuawhitehead.net. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, DJ, for helping us out and get this rolling. And I appreciate everyone being here, and I pray that God would continue to bless the ministry that He's called each of us to, and that He would use this for the sake of expanding His kingdom and supporting those that He's called into His work. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great time. Apologize again for any of the technical difficulties. You can find the video on xpastor.org and joshuawhitehead.net. Thanks so much.